Welcome everyone to the Player Prop Happy Hour. We made it to season 2. The listeners wanted us to return. We are going to be delivering 9 player props in 10 to 15 minutes. We'll see how that goes. Now, as everyone knows, I'm Josh Larky. I host this show, but more importantly are the two analysts whose bets are probably going to do better than mine this year. We've got Ryan Reynolds at Ryan Reynolds NFL on Twitter, and we've got our data scientist, Ben Wolby, at Ben Wolby on Twitter. Wolby, I'm kicking it to you. Give us your first week 1 prop of the day.
I think my favorite prop I've found so far this week is Derek Carr over 31.5 pass attempts. Best price right now is minus 115 on DraftKings. Teams against the Titans went over this in 14 games last year, only losing in 3, and they threw for an average of 37 attempts per game. That was a league high. Teams pass against Tennessee 18% more than the league average. Meanwhile, Derek Carr averaged 33 attempts per game. He went over this line in 9 of 15. Last year, Jameis Winston averaged 38 attempts per game, going 3-0 over this line. And now Derek Carr is the Saints quarterback, not Jameis Winston. The Saints averaged like 28 rushes per game once Andy Dalton became the quarterback, and that's a totally different story because now we see Alvin Kamara suspended, Kendre Miller is not 100% and unlikely to play, and I can't imagine this team being that rush heavy with a shiny new toy in their new quarterback, Derek Carr. I predict this to go over about 65% of the time.
I like it. Ryan, I'm going to kick it to you. Give us a prop for the same game, actually.
Yeah, I'm bullish on the Saints passing attack as well. Took Michael Thomas over 41.5 yards receiving. I actually like him at 3.5 yards or receptions as well. Got the yards at minus 115 on DraftKings. Titans gave up the second most receiving yards to receivers last year. They're a good run defense, bottom tier secondary. Now, it's a little scary, I understand. Thomas has only played 10 NFL games in the last 3 years, but he's healthy right now, and he beat both of these marks in each of his 3 games he played last season. I think this game also has some sneaky shootout potential, and like Ben said, I think they're going to run less because of the narrowed backfield and because of the matchup.
I like it. I'm going to stick with a quarterback over because it seems like we like some quarterbacks this week. I took Geno Smith over 21.5 completions. That's minus 115 on DraftKings. I think we'd all agree that the Seahawks are going to smash in this contest. The Rams have 8 players on defense out of their starting 11. 8 of their starting 11 are either undrafted free agents, rookies, or guys with draft capital of round 6 or round 7. 8 of their 11 defenders. This feels like a game where 3-4 touchdowns are going to be hung on the Rams at least. If we just look at Geno with this completions line last year, he was 11-6. So already we know that Geno's usually going over this line. And what did they do this offseason? They drafted round 1 receiver, the first guy off the board at that position with Jackson Smith and Jigba. They still have DK Metcalf. They still have Tyler Lockett. I am going to bet on the guy that led the NFL in completion percentage last year, when, if anything, his weapons got better. Now, before moving on to our next trio of props, if you want more betting content, Ryan writes up every single game on the33rdteam.com. They are free to read. I would recommend everyone does that. I read all of them each week. It helps me with my fantasy rankings. It helps me with just watching the games and knowing what to look for. So even if you're like, hey, I don't bet, I just like to listen to a betting show and read betting previews. Well, these betting previews are actually just great for real football, for fantasy, for DFS, etc. They're simply the best out there. And then one other thing I'll mention is that if you want more props and you go, guys, 9 is not enough, well, you should probably hop into our free Discord. Our Discord is linked in all the articles that we write on the33rdteam.com. And it's free to join. So why wouldn't you join there and get access to a lot of these props before the rest of the public does? Wolby, we're kicking it back to you. Give us your second prop, and let's stick at the quarterback position a little bit longer.
You got it, Josh. Last year, you made fun of me because I never took big boy props. So, week 1, we're picking a big boy prop. It is plus 110 on DraftKings. Justin Herbert over 2.5 rush attempts. He went over this number in 10 of 17 games last year. And if you're like Josh, who when I presented this, you're probably thinking, yeah, well, the team was banged up. But he averaged 3.5 rushes per game from week 11 onwards with a healthy Keenan Allen. And he averaged 3.7 carries per game in 2021 when Keenan Allen and Mike Williams missed a combined 2 games. Both of those numbers are one full rush over this line. And even Dak Prescott was averaging 3.8 rushes per game. The reason that's relevant is because of the Chargers' new offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore, who was the offensive coordinator of the Cowboys. Part of the reason why I absolutely love this play is quarterbacks versus Miami rushed at the 6th highest frequency last year, 88 total quarterback rushes for an average of 5 rushes per game. The only quarterbacks that didn't go over this line against Miami last year was Kirk Cousins, Jared Goff, Jimmy Garoppolo, and Joe Flacco, all quarterbacks who averaged fewer than 2 rush attempts per game to begin with. And the big reason why this happened is because Miami's defense is the 2nd best secondary by PFF, the 5th best defensive line. They were top 7 in pressures last year, but 22nd in sack percentage. They're getting pressures. They're not closing the deal. They're giving quarterbacks a chance to roll out and rush. I give this a 63% chance to go over, and it is at plus 110.
Wow, guys, right there. That is a real football take from a real data scientist. That is exactly what we love to see here at the 33rd team. Remember, at Ben Wolby on Twitter. Ryan, give us your second prop of the day.
First, remember to follow Josh Larky at JLarky Tweets on Twitter. I'm going to take Brock Purdy under passing yards, 234.5 on DraftKings at minus 115. He actually only beat this in one of his 6 regular season games last year. I like the under in this game in general. Both defenses have line play advantages. And most importantly to me, the parallel for Purdy here is when he played Dallas last year. That was the only premium front he played a whole game against last season. He only had 214 passing yards in that contest in a low-scoring game. Kind of view that as a similar scenario to the Steelers here. You know, betting against Kyle Shanahan's scary. That's the one thing that worries me here a little bit, but still, 234 is a pretty good number to bet against.
You know what a better number to bet against is if we could get this under 237.5 at minus 113 odds, which is actually slightly better than DraftKings. And you can actually do that on MyBookie. We recently partnered with mybookie.com, mybookie.com. And when you sign up, if you use promo code 33rd team, just 33RDTEAM, one word, 33rd team, you can get a 10% deposit match. You throw in $200, you get an extra $20. Now you have $220 to work with as your bankroll. Again, take that Brock Purdy prop because it's 237.5. I don't know why it's inflated there, but all I know is if we liked it in the low 230s, then we're going to like it even more, taking that under in the high 230s. My next prop, I'm going to stick with some big boy stuff here because this is plus 124. And what I'm looking at here is Chris Godwin over 5.5 receptions. So Chris Godwin was over this number in 13 of his final 14 games last year. You might be like, whoa, that's what the heck's going on with this line? Well, remember, that was with Tom Brady. So we have to adjust. I know the pass volume is going to be significantly lower. Tom Brady was basically putting up historic numbers those final 2 years of the Buccaneers, throwing over 700 times in each of those seasons. So you might say, well, then why should we be taking this Godwin over? Well, a few things. One, the Vikings are 5.5 point favorites. The Buccaneers are probably going to have to pass the ball. I don't believe they're going to be running on Rachaad White or leaning on Rachaad White running the ball 20 times a game in this contest. That's probably not their path to victory. Tampa Bay is going to need to pass. And we have Chris Godwin. We have Mike Evans. And then we have Trey Palmer, the day 3 rookie as their wide receiver 3. We have Cade Otton at tight end. That's not very exciting. And then we have Rachaad White, who's he's a talented pass catcher, but he plays running back. Essentially, this target tree is Godwin, then Evans, then Cade Otton and Rachaad White, and maybe Trey Palmer. It's so consolidated here. The Vikings are just a factory when it comes to allowing short to intermediate pass completions. And one other thing that I like is, yes, there's no Tom Brady, but last year, Godwin was also coming off of the late ACL tear from 2021. He was probably not fully healthy. He was probably not cutting to his fullest potential last year. So I think we get a little bit of extra health there as well. So I'm going to take his over 5.5 receptions plus 124 on DraftKings. Now, before moving on, if you want projections, you might like the way that Ben talks about his props. His projections are on the33rdteam.com for free. I've been looking over those. I know that he had Geno projected over 21.5 completions. I liked the look of that. And again, where else are you going to find a reputable data scientist like Mr. Wolby giving out projections for free? Nowhere else but the33rdteam.com. Wolby, let's kick it back to you. Now that I've buttered you up, give us your third and final prop of the day.
I feel so loved right now, which is why I would love to share with you my final prop. Tyler Boyd, over 32.5 receiving yards, minus 120 on DraftKings. There's this stigma that he's a handcuff wide receiver. Let's bet on him. Let's start him in our fantasy football lineups if Jamar Chase or T. Higgins gets hurt. And that is not the case because Tyler Boyd averaged 52 yards per game last year when T. Higgins and Jamar Chase played, which is 20 more yards than this prop. And he only averaged 35 yards per game in games where one of those guys missed. He's way better when they're on the field. As a matter of fact, he was 11-5 over this number last year, averaging 48 yards per game across all of their 16 games. And wide receivers with at least 30 snaps out of the slot versus the Browns last year went 5-2 over this number. That includes Tyler Boyd in week 8, who sees about 83% of his snaps or about 40 per game out of the slot. I like this at about 58% over.
That sounds quite tasty to me. I think that was actually news to me. I've definitely, hands up, I've been guilty of calling Tyler Boyd a handcuff receiver. I might have to change that behavior pattern. Ryan, at Ryan Reynolds, NFL on Twitter, the better looking, the more successful Ryan Reynolds, as I might add. Can you give us your third and final prop of the day?
Josh, as I've said many times now, I've disappointed several servers over the years, given my name. I'm going to play him in DFS this week. Khalil Herbert over 49.5 rushing yards on DraftKings at minus 115. Consistent coach speak has indicated that he's the lead dog in this backfield. He beat this number in 7 of 13 games last year that he recorded a carry. Now, here's the interesting wrinkle here. Dave Montgomery outcarried Herbert in 7 of those contests. Montgomery's in Detroit, as we saw last night. And his lone matchup against Green Bay last year, Herbert had 4 carries for 38 yards. Per The Edge, the Packers gave up the 7th most rushing yards to running backs last year. Like this a lot.
Yeah, I like that one too, guys. Go to the 33rdteam.com. And then our free tool, The Edge, is your best friend for fantasy props. There's no tool that's easier to use, and it is incredibly mobile friendly. So I know a lot of people are on the go. They want to take their phone out quickly, do a little quick research. You can do that on your phone. If you're like, hey, I'm a desktop guy, great. You can actually download all the data off The Edge. So slice and dice, use our intuitive filters however you want, and then you can just quickly grab that data into your own Excel file. My third and final prop of the day is going to come up in just a second, because one more time, just a reminder, mybookie.com, promo code 33rd team when you sign up. Get that 10% deposit match when you do. It helps keep the 3 of us employed. So if you enjoy this show, you might as well throw a little money in on that Brock Purdy under 237.5 pass yards at minus 113. My fantasy rankings are on the 33rdteam.com as well. If you play fantasy football, they're free. They also include write-ups from myself for player context, from Ben, from Hilo, from Alex Caruso. You need to be getting in on this. Our wide receiver guru, Jordan Vanek, wrote up a few players as well. Now, my final play of the day, DeAndre Swift. I'm taking him over 12.5 receiving yards, minus 120 on DraftKings. We are digging right back into the well on this one. Last year, DeAndre Swift was 12-2 on the over. I know, though, he is no longer with the immobile Jared Goff. He plays on the Eagles with Jalen Hurts. But let's think about it logically, because I think we can with the Eagles. They are, I think what we would say, like the Eagles and the Ravens might be the 2 most logical NFL teams with their moves. And if you're Philadelphia and you trade for DeAndre Swift and you're not giving him 2 receptions in most games, why did you trade for DeAndre Swift? Truly, I would be absolutely shocked. We saw Jahmyr Gibbs with disappointing usage last year. He still got his 2 catches for 18 yards. Pass catching backs, this is just a very easy thing to do. I'm not entirely sure what's going on here. This line's already moved on other books to 15.5. So you can get it at 12.5 on DraftKings. The Patriots allowed 5 receptions a game to running backs last year via the edge. And all we're asking for is 2. With 2 catches, he should have at least 13 receiving yards in this one. Guys, that will do it. What other show other than the Player Prop Happy Hour now in season 2 is going to give you 9 props in 15 minutes? I don't think you can find much better than that. Remember, Ben Wolby is at Ben Wolby on Twitter, our data scientist. Our associate director of fantasy and betting, Ryan Reynolds, is at Ryan Reynolds NFL on Twitter. And I'm your host, as always, Josh Larky. From all the 3 of us, from the 33rd team, from MyBookie. Thanks for tuning in.